to Bilingual Book Buddies podcast and webcast. Bilingual Book Buddies is dedicated to promoting bilingual books for children and sharing insights from authors, illustrators, editors, agents, and anyone involved in bringing these stories to life. I'm Claudia Sloan. I'm one of 3 co-hosts of Bilingual Book Buddies. I'm a Mexican American artist who also writes and illustrates books for children. I focus on themes of wellness, Latinx culture, life adventures, sports, among other things. In fact, my latest bilingual picture book is called We Are the Valley, Somos el Valle, and it's a dream come true collaboration with my favorite NBA and women's NBA professional basketball teams, the Phoenix Suns and the Phoenix Mercury. And now I have the pleasure to also introduce my co-host, Alicia Salazar and Silvia Lopez.
Hi, I'm Alicia Salazar, children's book author and former teacher. I've written bilingual and English language books for young readers, including Camila the Star and the Camila the Star series, Trolls, Loch Ness Monster, and my upcoming picture book, Cascarones, An Easter Surprise. I am passionate about stories that celebrate culture, spark imagination, and encourage kids to express themselves, especially in more than one language. Sylvia?
Hi, I'm Sylvia Lopez. I'm a Cuban American author living and working in Miami, Florida. After a lifelong career as a school librarian, I turned my sights to writing books for children. And I have written over 20 books. Many of them are bilingual. And that is my passion right now. So it is a pleasure to be here. And it is a pleasure to be part of the Bilingual Book Buddies project. And today I have the honor of introducing our guest. Our guest is Alexandra Alessandri. Alexandra Alessandri is an award-winning Colombian American author living and working also in Miami, Florida. By her own definition, she is a teller of tales and a lover of words. So that already speaks volumes about her life and her work. Her publication history, extending from poetry and short stories to middle grade novels, picture books, even a board book, has earned her numerous accolades. Besides writing, Alexandra is an adjunct professor of English at Broward College, a position made more significant by the fact that she is the daughter of Colombian immigrants and did not speak English until the age of 5. She is deeply proud of her roots, and this sentiment reflects in her writing. So welcome to Bilingual Book Buddies, Alessandra.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you for including me. I am so excited to be here with you all.
That's wonderful. Okay, so let's start our first questions. I also have the privilege of asking you with our very first question, which is an easy one. Can you share a bit about your journey to becoming a children's author?
Absolutely. And before I actually get started, I wanted to make a quick note because it is connected. I had a student once tell me, and then touching back to the bio, that they couldn't believe that I was teaching English composition and creative writing, that I was writing in English, even though I didn't know English early on, that I had started my journey as a only Spanish speaking. So it's been an integral part of my writing journey. So for me, I didn't begin writing until later, high school, college. And when I went to college, I thought I was going to be a poet. I pursued that until life kind of got in the way, and I went the more practical route of teaching, which goes hand in hand with writing. But one of the things that I didn't realize is that the very first seeds of storytelling actually did happen in my childhood, because I was always a storyteller. I was always with all my cousins, I'm an only child, but I have a large number of cousins. My mom is the eldest of 11. We have a lot of family. So I was always the resident storyteller. We would go summer vacation, we would all cram into a motel room and I would be telling stories, or they would come over and I would be telling stories. We would go to Colombia, I would be telling stories. And so those early seeds of storytelling really stuck with me. I come from a family of creatives. My great uncle was a novelist and a poet. And so that just, it was always in my heart, even though I didn't put it into practice professionally. It wasn't until my son was born, and actually after my dad passed away, that I found myself returning to story, and now in a more formal written form. I would read to my son, and he would get excited for the stories. One more chapter, he would beg me. And it was in those moments of shared community, reading the picture books, reading chapter books, that I remembered how much stories functioned in my childhood. And I wanted to do that more. And so I started now seriously pursuing writing for children and young adults, because I did recently have a story for young adults in an anthology. But
That's excellent. Excellent answer. Thank you, Alexandra. I'll pass you over now to Alicia.
All right, give me just a minute. I'm gonna pull up.
Okay. Did you
Okay.
get it?
Oh, yes. Okay, so my question. Besides two very successful middle grade novels you published in 2024, you are also the author of picture books and a board book. How does your creative process shift between writing for older readers and writing for younger children?
that's a great question. At the heart of my process, regardless of the age category or the audience for whom I'm writing, reading is central to that. So as I'm working and focusing on middle grade, I am reading other middle grade novels. I'm reading other authors and reading other stories, in part because it helps me focus on the voice. So not just the voice, the voice of my characters I'm working on individually, but it helps me refocus, I guess that's the word, from the younger audience to now the middle grade audience, and vice versa. When I'm done with the middle grade and I'm ready to start working on picture books, I go through a period of reading and reading and reading mentor texts in that for that audience and in that age category, just to refocus my vision in terms of who my audience is. That involves also brainstorming things that are age related. Where is this age group developmentally? What are some of the dreams and hopes that this age group has? What are some of the things that they experience universally outside of my individual focus? What is universally, what is going on in this age group or in this age category? And that helps me kind of refocus my attention into that age category, that audience for whom I'm writing.
That's an excellent answer.
And you have such a collection of beautiful books. And your stories, talking about beautiful, celebrate your Colombian roots along with Latinx culture and bilingualism. How do your own childhood experiences and your identity as a Colombian American influence the characters and themes in your books?
So they influence them a lot. And as you mentioned, if not explicitly with Colombian characters set in Colombia or about Colombia in one way, shape, or form, the characters are deeply rooted in. I write from what I know, and I know that there's this, write what you know, but not really, because you're writing to figure something out, to learn something, to discover something. And I realized that I write what I know to discover something about myself, about my culture, about my community, and about the world at large. I think in part there was a wanting to reconnect. My cousin recently actually reminded me that I went through a rebellious period during my teen years where I didn't want to speak Spanish. I didn't want I was American. I'm not going to speak English. I'm sorry, I'm not going to speak Spanish. I'm not going to focus on Colombia. I wanted to go to the sleepovers. I wanted to go to, and I think there's been almost like a return home. Perhaps it started when my dad passed away, and even though my mom is also Colombian, there was this sense of loss of part of my culture because so much of the creative part came from my dad. And so I came back and there's this return home, which I've subconsciously done in what I write. I'm writing what I know, but in doing so, I'm also writing to rediscover Colombia, rediscover those parts that are magical, those parts that are hard, discover what it means to be a Colombian American as not just for myself, but for my son, who's second generation American, and for all the children like him who are trying to figure out, well, what does it mean? Am I Colombian or am I fill in the blank because I speak the language, because I like the foods, because I engage in the culture, or is it something deeper than that? And so subconsciously it started. And then once I realized that that was happening, I have made a conscious effort because I want to celebrate my culture, which has for a long time been looked down upon. And I grew up with the stereotypes. I grew up with hearing the snide remarks about Colombia, and the drug dealers and the trauma that was happening in my country. So I've now made that consecrated effort to focus and celebrate and lift up.
Thank you for that. And I think that's actually very important. And I love the rediscovering part, because I think that happens to a lot of us, especially those of us who come to this country as immigrants at an early age, and then before you know it, you're in two cultures, and then at some point you kind of feel like you have to pick, and of course you're Americanized and so forth. I went through something similar, and I totally resonate, or those words of yours totally resonate with me, because I kind of, the discovering part was part of growing too, and accepting who I am wholly, not just one part, but the two cultures, and actually a third culture, because you got
Right.
the culture of
Yes,
a third culture that is a mix of the two. So thank you for that.
absolutely.
Okay. How do you approach weaving cultural traditions like New Year's celebrations or hurricanes in the Caribbean into your storytelling in a way that feels natural and accessible to all readers, regardless of their own backgrounds and experiences?
Thanks for that question. I think at the heart of all storytelling is a universal emotion. And that universal emotion is what allows us to connect, that despite the differences of experiences, we are connecting with an emotion that resonates across. There's no barriers to that emotion. And so for example, in Isabel and her Colores Go to School, the universal emotion is the fear and the worry when encountering something new and being in a new place where you don't know anyone. There's the added layer of language. Her story is based on my story of starting schooling without knowing how to speak English. But aside from that, I have had students from other walks of life with other experiences who understand what it's like to feel that worry and to feel that nervousness when stepping into something new. And so I think at the heart of weaving in the individual nuances of my culture and my experiences is the emotion that is then universal.
That is an excellent answer. That is just a great answer. And to go back just a little bit to what you said before, to the answer to the previous question, or a couple of questions ago, I just identify with your student that mentioned that, because I didn't speak English till I was 10. And then I became an English major in college. So I think that English must have some kind of a draw
Mm.
to all of us. Um, it is very important because I also identified with you, not myself. So, well, I guess myself also, but also my children. They went through that phase of, I'm an American. I don't want to speak Spanish. Well, now they're grown and they're adults, and Spanish is an integral part of their lives and of their jobs and their work. So, we're all identifying with all these wonderful things that you're saying here today. So I have the next question. And this one really, I'm interested in your answer very much. Some bilingual books are published with both the complete English and Spanish texts on a page or facing pages, like, for example, Charuco by Monica Brown with Elisa Chavarri. But others, like most of yours, and are written in English with Spanish, and ours too, English with Spanish interspersed in the text. So that's what, they're bilingual books. But one of your books, Isabel and Her Colores Go to School, is unique in that the complete Spanish translation is included on each page, not one in one, but just somewhere on the page, on a bubble or as part of some decoration or some illustration, we find the translation. Can you tell us a little bit about the decision to publish that book in that way? And why was that particular format chosen for that story?
That's a great question. And I would love to be able to say that I was the one with the idea. I had the dream, of course, of seeing my books published in both English and in Spanish. And in fact, I still have the dream that my other books will be also published in Spanish. But my editor and my publisher, my editor specifically, actually came to us and said, "We would love to publish this in Spanish." And it was wonderful because it was a dream I had that I was afraid to voice, and she brought it to the table. And I was like, "Yes, absolutely 100%. I'm fully on board." And then she said, "Will you translate?" And I'm like, "Oh, wait, what?" Um, which was another beautiful, wonderful, challenging experience. But it was originally, she brought it to the table. We were 100% on board. I love the idea, especially because having both the text in English and in Spanish in the same book presents itself with so many wonderful opportunities in the classroom, both in the English classroom and in the Spanish classroom. I've done book clubs, Spanish book clubs. And it's just presented such a wonderful opportunity for integration into the classroom. I joke often that I can read this book in English, I can read it in Spanish, I can read it in Spanglish, but it does provide that wonderful flexibility of implementation.
Thank you. That's exactly what we wanted to know because it is such a wonderful book. And it is, I'm glad that you brought up the classroom because that's also something that is very important about these bilingual books that we're writing and we're promoting. And that's going to be one of our next questions. So I'm going to pass you over to Claudia, who has the next question.
Yeah, well, talking about the classroom, you're in a very unique position where you not only just reading the material and sharing it with the kids, but you also get to create some of that material. So as both an educator and a writer, how do your teaching experiences inform your writing and vice versa?
So they absolutely do. So both the teaching and the writing, and I think especially because I teach writing, because I teach English composition, I teach at the college level. So I don't teach the readers that I write for. However, I have used picture books and middle grade novels in some of my composition classes where we do special topics like I taught diversity in children's literature actually for writing about diverse children's literature for quite a few semesters. But the two are they're two sides of the same coin, where as a teacher, I am teaching about the writing process. I am teaching how to craft, whether it's an essay or a creative piece like a poem or a short story. We are engaging in that same writing process, the steps. And so as a writer, I am practicing what I am preaching in that sense. And so I'm actually able to, in the classroom, show my own experiences in dealing with writer's block, in dealing with a moment where what you think you're writing is not what it's coming out, and you're looking at it and saying, well, this is terrible. And we need that terrible first draft, because if we don't have that for terrible first draft, we can't build upon, we can't revise. And so I am showing them my process. I'm showing them my errors. I'm showing them the real application of what they're learning. On the flip side, my students have actually informed a lot and inspired me. And I remember a student, he was Haitian, and it was the diversity in children's literature class, and I brought picture books, and one of those was Edwidge Danticat's picture book. And I remember him looking at the book and saying, there's a picture book about Haiti, and that disbelief, that awe, that wonder, that excitement, that is the same excitement that I feel when I see another book by a Colombian author featuring Colombia. And it was one of those pivotal moments that reminded me of why I'm writing, how I write, and why I'm writing the Colombian characters, of why I'm weaving in my culture. But my students inspire me, their stories inspire me. They may be adults, but some of them have children. They're just wonderful, wonderful people who inspire the stories that I write.
Well, and remember, children's books are not just for
No,
children.
they're
In
for
fact,
everyone.
there's so many things that
No.
as an adult person we can learn from children's books.
Absolutely. 100%.
I love it.
Absolutely, absolutely. It was one of the things when I was a school librarian, a media specialist, and I would have an older reader, middle grade, maybe fourth, fifth grade, and they would come and pick out a picture book and go back to the classroom, and the teacher would send them back. No, they can't read a baby book. And I used to have, finally, after working in the same school for several years, I was able to, teachers saw the point of view that it was not. It was a wonderful story that child wanted to read over and over again, and it had a message for him or
Yeah.
her. They have messages for me. On my research, I always begin with the most basic picture books. I pick up the best facts, and then I move on from there. All right, so let's go. I have this question. Talking about libraries, our audience includes librarians and teachers. Do you know of any unique needs or challenges that these two groups face, specifically in promoting bilingual books? And how do you think that you would address those challenges?
So there's certainly, we just need to look around, and we see the challenges right now that are being faced. And at the heart, the book bans especially are hurting, are implementing, are being able to bring these diverse stories that are these bilingual books into the classroom and into libraries. They are impacting authors being able to share their own works with students, because and I certainly have received this pushback. Well, your story is only for Latinx community. How is this working for all of the students? They've missed that universal aspect, not to mention the need for those windows and those mirrors. Not we want to meet the needs of our Latinx students, but also those Latinx stories are integral for everyone. Latinx history is American history, and so these book bans are impacting our ability to share those stories. Sometimes with the students who need them most, But I would argue that for all the students who need them, because
Well, I
all
think
of
it goes
them.
back to what you said, Alexandra, that they have the common thread of emotion, which is universal. That is universal. We feel the same things. Eh, Uh, if you cut me, will I not bleed? Type of thing,
Right.
We share the emotions universally throughout our world, and these differences, these diversities, I think they only would serve to bring us together more rather than
Absolutely.
apart, because we
Absolutely.
can see what we share rather than what makes us different. But
So,
unfortunately, like you said, the book bans and that attitude of what is this good for if it's only for the Latinx readers is something that needs to be
Not to
worked
mention our
upon.
our world is beautifully diverse. And
It's
yeah.
so we are not pigeonholed into just one category.
And
So,
I just wanted to add to that when, at least the way I feel about it when that arises, is that the core messages of most of these books are universal for humans, and we're all
absolutely.
human. So
100%.
I feel like the uh, people behind these banning and movements to try to segregate different groups and so forth, they're overlooking the very important aspect of us all, which is our own humanity.
Humanity.
And I dream of the day when we're gonna be fully blind to color and culture and other things, and just focus on each other as a human. I really like you because you're a human person and you're so nice and you're talented on X, Y, and Z, and focus on that.
That's right.
I
And
would
we
probably,
celebrate our diversity. We
yeah,
celebrate
Exactly.
that.
celebrate the things that makes us different, but not as things that to highlight or point out and say, well, you don't belong here because of that, or I can
Correct.
understand you because of that, because at the core, I think the humanity piece is what's missing. So
Yeah.
hopefully they can see this webcast and
I hope so. I hope so. Well, I'm hoping that the people who watch our webcasts are going to be picking up on a lot of these points that we're making. And, it'll be helpful for them because they're going to be faced with the same challenges that Alexandra was just talking about, as somebody coming up and making that comment. And I'm hoping that these will provide answers for them. The one just I gave and Claudia just talked about. And so that's our entire purpose here is just not to promote a book, but to promote the ideas of a bilingual book, bicultural, multicultural. So that's our purpose here. Okay, so now we have Alicia.
Yes. Another group that we'd like to reach are parents who may often struggle with maintaining their native language and cultural identity in their children. How do you think bilingual books may benefit these parents? And do you feel it's possible for parents who don't speak a second language to still engage with bilingual books with their children?
So, and for the latter part, absolutely, yes. I've actually, some of the parents of students that I've met don't speak Spanish, but they're celebrating and reading the books right along with them. Most of my books don't have the translation, the full translation. It has English with just a couple of words in Spanish. And the beauty of that is being able to use the illustrations and context to understand the story. But even in this book, let's say Isabel's case, that is completely that has a translation fully in Spanish, they are able to engage in that book because while the student is perhaps learning Spanish in a classroom and being able to read it in Spanish, the parent is able to read the English counterpart and share that story, talk about that story, talk about themes, talk about the character. They're also able to look at the illustrations and see how that learned. They're even able to learn Spanish along the way, which is really cool. In terms of how do the bilingual books benefit parents? Um, just in general for me as a parent, being able to share a book that has Spanish in it in a way helps me reinforce Spanish, which I haven't always done a fantastic job at. Full disclosure, I haven't done a fantastic job, even though I'm fully bilingual. I work in English, everything that I do, my day-to-day language has become English, so that when it comes to speaking Spanish at home, I don't always hit the mark. But bilingual books have helped me reinforce that, bring it to the table in a way that maybe sometimes I don't do. It's also a way for my son to be able to share with his grandparents, with his grandmothers. So they help parents, they help reinforce not just the language, but also brings in some cultural aspects that they may then recognize in their day-to-day lives. So with Feliz New Year, Eva Gabriela, my son was able to see those elements that we celebrate for New Year's, but in the book form. A student may say, well, which I've had actually a student tell me, well, I know what tamales are. There's tamales toward the end of the book, but do you know what pupusas are? So there are ways of making those connections, and kids are brilliant at making those connections with the story and then also with the parents.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
That is
Claudia,
totally.
I think you have the next question, I think.
I
Okay.
do. So our audience also includes authors who are writing bilingual books. Do you have a method for choosing which words or phrases to use in the second language? And also, what advice would you give to aspiring authors who are trying to, well, to all authors in general, but especially those who are trying to write bilingual books or culturally rooted stories for children?
So for choosing what words or phrases I use, in my first draft, I go with my gut instinct. I speak naturally in Spanglish. Spanish just automatically kind of comes in to my day-to-day speech. And so in that first draft, I go with what feels right, with what feels natural to the way that I speak, to the way that I think the characters speak. In the revision, I start looking at those phrases and or words and seeing what makes the most sense to the story. Sometimes I have a lot more Spanish, sometimes I have less. If I have less, I look for ways to incorporate more, always looking at what feels organic to both the story and to myself, and my form of expression. So those are the two benchmarks that I look. What is integral for the story, and what makes sense for the story, and what makes sense to me, as a Spanglish speaker, I guess. And in terms of advice to aspiring authors, don't be afraid to share your story. Don't be afraid. And I know it's easier said than done, especially for those aspects of our identity that perhaps are the more challenged by society. But and this is and this is actually advice for myself as well, because there is always a little bit of this layer of fear, perhaps anxiety, in trying to write your most honest self. Even though we're not writing memoir, it's not, because it is writing from experience. There is that layer of fear, and I would say don't be afraid to share those parts of your culture, of your identity that you love.
Very well put, very inspiring too. And I always hear that message is like put a little bit of yourself in that story. Cannot go wrong with that. Yeah. So very nice.
Well, I think Alexandra is touching upon something so important at this moment, because a lot of the bilingual writers will have an immigration story in their background somewhere. And sometimes we hesitate because we say, well, it's not popular right now. It could offend people who don't share the view of immigration. But it is our story. And I think it all comes back to what we have said before. It isn't only the actions that are taking place, it's the emotion that is taking place. And the world is a story of immigration. Since time began. I mean, it's just people have immigrated since we left Africa. So um, it's right now there are people who hesitate to put that part of themselves or of their families into their stories. And like Alexandra said, do not be afraid to do that because it is the story. It is our story and it needs to be told. And so,
And only you
okay,
can tell your
Your
story.
own
your
story.
own.
And
Exactly.
if I may also add,
Please.
Oh, please. You sure.
feel free to tell all the stories, the joyful ones too. It doesn't need to always be a story of hardship or of pain, because then we tell people that they're only as good as that pain. And so in sharing as educators, as librarians, stories, and in telling stories as authors, we should look at highlighting the full spectrum of that experience and that includes the joy as well. The silly stories, you
Yeah.
know, the yes, the painful ones, but also the joyful ones.
Good point.
Yes.
Very good point. Alicia?
Yes. You have an upcoming book, Fly Pajarito Fly, releasing in 2026. Can you give us a sneak peek into what the story is about and what inspired it? And can you share with us some of your other upcoming projects?
Absolutely. So I'm really excited about Fly Pajarito Fly. It is written in free verse, so it is a story written in verse. And it's a mother-daughter story that was inspired by the nightly walks that I used to do with my mom when I was a child. And we would go past this big oak tree that she would call El Hotel de los Pájaros. And so for me, it was good, here in South Florida during the fall, we get all the migration of the birds, right? And so it was a very noisy tree, this Hotel de los Pájaros. And so that memory stuck with me, El Hotel de los Pájaros. I tried writing a story about it that focused on the experience of the birds, and it was a silly story and it totally didn't work. But I put it aside and then I came back to it with the heart of that mother-daughter relationship, that mother-daughter, this experience, this tradition, nightly tradition of going through and this child who has a bit of separation anxiety. Something I've discovered along the way of this whole writing thing is that I tap a lot into social emotional learning, even when I'm also bringing in, let's say, STEM, for example. But social emotional learning is for me at the heart of a lot of what I write. And so this child had it wants to fly like the birds, but she's afraid. And throughout the course, she has to kind of rediscover her own strength to be able to fly on her own. And so that's just the general premise of the story. I'm really excited about it for a variety of reasons. But yeah, that's coming
That's
in
great.
fall 2026.
Just like we were saying, our very own stories, and you make a parallel there that's wonderful with the bird that leaves the nest, like we all must.
Yeah.
And so wonderful. That sounds great. I can't wait for the book. Okay. Last question. What are the main messages or takeaways that you would like all our listeners to gain from your interview today?
Your story matters. I think that's the heart that I tend to kind of always come back to. What I tell the young readers when I meet them at schools and I tell my students is your story matters. Um, which part you choose to tell is your choice, but don't forget that your story matters and it's
That's
important
wonderful.
and it's worth
Thank you.
telling.
And that's a
Yes.
beautiful way to end our segment. A beautiful message. Your story matters, and you matter. This brings us to the conclusion of our main segment, and now we are going to go into our rapid fire questions. Drum roll. These are the 3 questions that we ask of every guest, and you just answer briefly, 90 seconds or less, whatever comes to mind. So the first one is, what's one fact about you that even your biggest fans might not know?
So before I started writing fully in earnest, I was looking for something creative, and I still really love to do this, but I love crafting. I had stamps, and I would do scrapbooks, and I would do cards, and in fact, you'll see a little bit of that in one of my middle grade novels.
Nice. I would not have.
Wonderful. So now we know.
You know.
All right. Alexandra, if others were to describe you in 1, 2, or 3 words, what would those words be?
Silly, creative. Ay.
That's good. That's fine.
Silly, creative.
It
Those that
doesn't get
really
any
know me.
better for an author of children's books than silly and creative. It doesn't get any better than that, believe me.
That's the
You've covered
perfect
it.
combination.
You've covered it. And I have a feeling now, want to come in here with the Florida Library Association's theme this year for their conference has something to do with, laugh out loud.
Oh, I
And
love
make
it.
it fun. I know. It's usually very, very sedate. These are a bunch of librarians that meet at this conference every year. This year, the president is he's wonderful. Comes out with the clown nose.
I love
And
it.
also Hilo Colectivo coming up with Jorge Insunza and others. Their theme
Cumbre.
this year
La
is
cumbre.
laugh. They want to
I
laugh.
love
They want to
it.
make fun. And you know what? When you think about it, I think it's so necessary at this moment. We need to keep our sense of humor. We need to keep it right very close and hold it tight.
If we don't laugh, we cry.
Yes, that's right.
Is this their theme for La Cumbre that they have, or is the theme
Their
for the
theme
entire
for
year?
no, the Florida Library Association is one. For Hilo Colectivo en La Cumbre, I think that La Cumbre and the whole thing about Hilo Colectivo this year may be coming up as have fun,
Have fun.
laugh,
I love
make it
it.
funny. Keep your sense of humor, which is very important. Okay, one more question. Ready, Alicia?
Last question. What book or books have had the most impact in your life?
So I have to say the 2 books that have had the most impact in my life were Isabel Allende's The House of the Spirits and Esmeralda Santiago's When I Was Puerto Rican. Those 2, for 2 very different reasons, impacted my journey, not just as a writer, but also individually and personally.
Amazing.
Wonderful.
Really
Wonderful. Good to know.
Well, this brings us to the end of our wonderful time with you. Thank you so much, Alexandra, for spending this morning with us and sharing all your insights. This has been lovely. Sylvia, Alicia, what do you guys say?
I have nothing to add. I want to show, I think Alicia has another slide to show, which will show these better.
No, I
We
have
have-
it over here.
got
Let
it.
me-
Oh, you have them, Claudia. I have all her books here, which of course I had read before, but I went and got now. And not only do I have those, but I also have these. Okay, I have these. So I'm halfway through The Enchanted Life, and I'm going to read her short story that's in this anthology. So this is what I do for all our authors, but in this case, it's such a pleasure. Not only are they beautiful books, but it's just such a beautiful person to hear from. So
And I am
this
so
is-
grateful to all of you for inviting me. I love this conversation. You had such incredible questions, and I can't wait to check everybody else out.
Yes, you're gonna love all
I
our
know.
interviews. We've had such great insights, just like yours, but everybody's different point of view is what we were talking about. Everybody has had different experiences. So we've all been Alicia and Claudia and I have benefited from these interviews as much as we think the people who are going to be watching them are going to benefit from them. So, because you've given us today such pearls of wisdom. It's been wonderful to hear from you, Alessandra.
We learn
Wonderful,
from each
wonderful,
other.
Alexandra.
We
Yes.
learn from each other, and I think that's important as writers, is to learn from each other. It's not us against the world. It's we're all in this together,
No,
and we
exactly.
learn very much from each other's stories.
I love your words. We're in this together. It is the writer journey. It's known to be a solo, lonely journey. It doesn't
It
have to be
is.
that way.
Yeah,
No, it is not. It doesn't have to be that way. That's why we have critique groups. That's why we have
yeah.
projects like this. That's why we have conferences, SCBWI conferences, the Latinx Kid Lit Book Festival coming up in September. Those are all opportunities for all of us to meet, to exchange ideas, to uh, actually just bounce from one to the other with ideas. And we always come out of those very motivated and very refreshed, as we have today with your wonderful answers, Alexandra. Absolutely wonderful. So we have enjoyed this interview tremendously. Thank you so much for sharing the time and your day with us and your hour with us. And to everybody, we hope to see you very soon.
Yes.
Stay tuned. May 14th, we're going to launch all our interviews that we have had so far, and they are all as wonderful as Alexandra's was today.
I
So
can't wait for
thank
May
you.
14th.
Yes. Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a
Thank you
wonderful
so
time.
much.